And we're going deep tonight. Welcome to the RSP cast with Angelo _ fantasy. Brandon
Sir,
Angelo. Always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
absolutely.
Yeah, and first of all, you guys should check out Angelo Analysis, and what's the website name specifically? Because I just have a bookmark,
Yeah, that's
and I
actually
always say
right. Yeah,
Angelo Analysis.
it's
I'm surprised.
angeloanalysis.com. You got it right. I love
I'm
it.
I'm surprised that I did because I'm awful with short-term memory stuff. It feels like these days, but absolutely, I've been checking out the site this week, and I've just bookmarked it, so I just click, so I don't,
Love it.
remember. But like you guys definitely need to check it out. The subscription's awesome. The videos that are out are cool. You get these, you, you know concise analysis of players, and you can kind of dig in a couple of different ways to see where Brandon falls with these different types of players, and so it's definitely been worth it for me, and it's been fun, and I like it because as someone who's doing my own stuff, you can't help but kind of cross check what you see.
100%.
So like when I read it and go, I can't help but, and especially in my job, especially if you've been an editor, you've been a writer, all this stuff,
For sure.
you can't avoid it. So when I look at your stuff and I go, yeah, that's a concise way of putting that. Yeah, that's an accurate, concise way of putting that. Yeah, that makes sense how you do. So you're getting accurate, from my opinion at least. We're both really
Well,
wrong,
good.
but like I like looking at it going, that makes a lot of sense. Like this stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because I did the same thing with the RSP. So I got it on Monday. And I think I released like the full version of my site that Saturday, that next Saturday, because we released it on Sunday, and I got the email and I was happy. And then I was looking at it, and I'm like, let me go back and see if I wrote it that well or I need to change it because I need to write it. I need to write it better. So it's kind of funny because what you do in terms of like your long form analysis is so unique because it's not like like a long article that you're like, oh, okay, I have to get to the bottom. You're like, okay, I have to keep going. Like I have to keep reading. And I stared at my computer screen for probably 45 minutes. I think it was on receivers. I just kept reading, and then like I got done, and I'm like, what time is it? And I think that's the coolest thing about the RSP
Thanks.
from my standpoint. This is the first year I've gotten it. You and I talked about it a lot last year. It's the first year I've gotten it, and that was my biggest takeaway. Was that part of it was just I could have gone on to read for another 45 minutes
Nice.
and then another 45 minutes, and that's the biggest thing is it's one of those chapterless books that you just kind of flow really well. But yeah, I mean that's a really rare thing. Very, very rare. I'm not a super avid reader, I'm more of a listener. Um, but that's a rare thing for me to be able to sit down and read something for 45 minutes. So
Well,
big
well,
kudos to you, Matt,
well.
because that's
Here's to our mutual admiration society as
for
our first
sure.
time purchasers of each
Yeah,
other's
for
work.
sure. For sure. I love it.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate that, and I've
No,
that
anytime.
vision. I'm as I told Brandon before the show. I'm like, I know y'all know my site's old, and I've got two different sites to do what I'm doing, and I'm working on that. I can't go into like details as to
Yeah.
why that all that is the way it is. But I'll just put it this way: is that I was definitely envious of how nice the site work was of what Brandon did. I was like, yeah, one day we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll baby step it.
Yeah, we're working on it. But today, the nice part is we're gonna have a fun show. We're gonna be talking about some of our thoughts on the scouting journey of this class, some write ups from our sites that we enjoyed doing, um, thoughts on the phrase "coach killer," and maybe some players that we think might fit into what our version of that definition is, and
Sure.
then some high end career outcomes for for some prospects, mainly three wide receivers who I think are a bit polarizing in this class that Brandon brought up that I'm glad he did. So we kind of split the difference here and contributed like we usually do, and we'll go from there. So let's talk about this, Brandon. What was unique about this class or your scouting journey with this class
Sure.
that you've never experienced before with 2024's group?
Yeah, I think the most unique part about it is you kind of have that top five guys or so in this class, right? Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Jerome Dunze, Brock Bowers. After that, it is a hodgepodge of guys that you can rank from like 6 all the way down like to 25. And for me, when I compiled my film grades, there's so many prospects within like 2% of each other.
Yes.
So this is going to be the biggest year, I think, because now the NFL, if you look at it from a talent standpoint, there's now talent saturation. So you have a lot of really talented players at the top, but you have so many players in that middle tier of talent in the NFL nowadays. They're very similar in terms of talent ceiling. So now what happens is you get all these players who are in that same vein coming in the NFL at the same time. So like something's definitely got to give. So like not all these guys who are in within 2% of each other from a talent standpoint are going to end up in successful long-term scenarios. And just looking at it from that lens, it's kind of maddening because you're like, okay, I see Javon Baker as a first rounder, but if he gets drafted in the third round to a team that has 3 receivers already, when's he going to get an opportunity?
Right.
Just like stuff like that. And it's like that's going to matter so much more in this class more than any because of the large span of talent in that middle tier. There's not really a large gap. Like in years past, you had a larger gap between the talent as a whole between like 1, 2, 3, then like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now it's like 5 and then it's 25. Like it is very deep in terms of scenarios where all these guys can improve. And even like at the bottom tier of this, like in terms of producers, you have guys like A.D. Mitchell, who's still a first rounder because he's athletically some of the best measurables we've ever seen in our century.
Yeah.
It's nuts. So it's the craziest thing when you look at it from that perspective. But I think that's been I'd say the most fun part of this class is diving into more of the intricate details of what's going to make X prospect successful, but also what can derail that success quickest. Yeah. And I think that's going to be more of the talk of what we have in another year and a half from now when we do this again, is talk about what happened to some of these guys that led to their lack of success. And because not all these guys can be super successful players, right? But what led to was it injury? Was it, lack of schematic attention? Was it coaching? Was it a deep receiver room or running back, a quarterback room, right? Just stuff like that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of highlight that in a couple years down the line. For you, how did you view it? And obviously this year was a big year for the RSP because this is a really polarizing class, and also it has one clear top guy in it, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I mean, the strength of the wide receiver group was just unique for me. I mean, 2014 was the strongest group I've seen, but I was scoring receivers differently compared to what I know now about route running and how to evaluate route running. I'm in a much different place. This is the first class that I feel like where I've had a good handle on route running, where I've seen so much talent. And to have Aniyah Smith as my 11th wide receiver, and he scored a score this year that would have put him number 2 last year, just tells you how strong this class is. And then all the things that you appropriately mentioned about the factors that have nothing to do with the score, but have to do with level of competition on your team and fit and draft capital and injuries, and all those things are going to really determine a lot that people are going to look at it and say, And you already know. I mean, the average fantasy person or just fan is going to go,
Right.
"Oh, this class was disappointing compared to all the hype that everybody gave," and
Right.
you're just
Yeah.
going to be like, "Dude, you don't get it. You don't get it. I understand where you're coming from, but you don't get it. It's not
Right.
about." We know that not all of them are going to hit. We know that it's going to be a small number. You know,
Sure.
I'm not trying to oversell you on that. You get a great wide receiver and you get a great wide receiver. It's really like, these guys are worth taking the chance on. But that aside, because we talked about that, I would say the thing that was unique about it too is having so many running backs that I just look at and just feel like it's like an amorphous blob of an order. I mean,
Yeah,
just
no, for sure.
I mean, like, it's just really like it's not very well defined. Like for me, it's like I get Marshawn Lloyd. I totally get him. I also know that like I'm not. I can't grade a guy. I can't grade a guy for good ball security when he hasn't shown it, and he's like shown it as badly as he has.
Right.
I can't. I can't do it, even though I know common sense wise, there's a part of me that's like I know that there are scenarios where these guys get it together and it's fine.
For
But
sure.
I also know there's scenarios where guys never get it together and it never works out, and I
Right.
haven't figured out which one's which.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And for running back, it's interesting in this class because that's like the biggest mess of any position group, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's there are all these guys, but the funny thing is, none of them are perfect.
right.
But the smaller school guys are better than the large school guys in most aspects, in my opinion. But are those guys going to be afforded the same opportunity in terms of draft capital as the large school guys? Like pound for pound, Kamani Vidal is a better running back than Marshawn Lloyd is. I think
Agreed.
people who watch and understand the running back position will agree with that. However, draft capital is going to dictate a different story where Kamani Vidal is probably going to be a fourth, fifth, sixth round guy. Marshawn Lloyd is going to be a second round player and maybe the first running back off the board. So that's the crazy thing. Those leashes are different.
Yes.
Kamani Vidal is probably a very short leash in the NFL, where Marshawn Lloyd has a longer leash because he has a larger capital,
Yeah.
right? And he's going to potentially play right away.
Yep.
And that's the crazy thing is you have that in this class because you do have really interesting small school guys who, from a pure talent perspective and just looking at them on the field of play, probably as good as, like I said, if not better than some of the large school guys. Like guys like Rasheen Ali. If he wouldn't have ruptured his bicep tendon, I think that's going to set him back capital wise half a round plus. He's a really good back. Like there's just guys like that across the board here, and it's really interesting because there's not a clear cut best back in this class
Yeah.
or best two backs in this class like there was in last class with Robinson and Gibbs. It's just a lot of guys in the same talent arena,
Yeah.
but who is going to make more mistakes and who is going to stay healthy for longer? Because even guys like Corum, he had the injury 2 years ago, or last year, I should say. Brooks, ACL. Marshawn Lloyd had an ACL his freshman year, I believe. Somewhat of an injury risk moving forward. You have all of these guys.
Yeah.
But capital is going to be interesting to see how long their leash is. But yeah, the running back position in this class it's everybody's just kind of together.
Yeah. It is, and it's just like it's kind of a fool's paradise for an evaluator because you're just like, all right, well, how do I give? I'm glad I've been doing it as long as I have because people understand enough of what I'm trying to do. Because I feel like if this were my first year and I was going, well, my number 12 guy could be my number 2 guy if this changed. It just sounds
Right.
like bad hedging, you know?
Yeah,
But because
for sure.
it sounds that way. So but if people understand the why behind that and you've done a good job of articulating that, it makes sense and it's that's understandable. But it's hard to do. It's hard, but it's still something you look at and you go, I hate that I'm in this situation where I'm literally going, well,
It's
I don't like a lot about Braylon Allen's game, but I can understand how he could be one of the 3 most productive backs in this class.
100%. It's just looking at the it's looking at the range of outcomes for the prospect instead of saying I was right about XYZ.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think that's tough because we live in sometimes a very black and white world in terms of right and wrong.
Yeah.
So in terms of evaluating talent or evaluating anything, it's likely that really large gray area where it's looking at the range of outcomes.
Yeah.
Some range of outcomes are very vast and some are smaller, right?
Yeah.
For like Caleb Williams, the range of outcomes is not as big as it is for like Braylon Allen. Like, Braylon Allen could be out of the league in 2 years.
Yep.
And that's the crazy part about it. But in another, he could be, a Pro Bowl caliber back in 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's the crazy thing about some of these guys is looking at it from the standpoint of this is the range of outcomes.
Yeah.
This is what could happen at X time of year if they stay free from injury, if they perform well. There's just so many different factors, especially in this class.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And so that's the fun part. Though I love that. That's the fun part of being able to separate out evaluation from valuation. You know, and that's probably my favorite thing about this is that right now learn about the player, learn about all the potentials 100%. And all the ranges of outcomes, and then after the draft, now we'll focus on who do we think is going to have the best opportunities to shine. All right.
Right.
So, who was your favorite write-up, at your site? Is that what you wanted to do? Is you wanted to do or were you looking at it a different way? Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, okay. Perfect.
What was your favorite? What was your favorite write-up?
Yeah, I'm actually more curious to hear what your favorite prospect of the RSP is this year. But I'll since you asked me first, I'll go ahead and deliver. So for me, mine was two. I have actually two. Javon Baker, for obvious reasons. I just think the nuance of his game was much more than the public thought. I think the public opinion initially was guy who transferred from Bama, smaller school, he's going to improve, he's obviously going to produce. But there is a nuance there to him playing outside receiver that I did not know existed from him as a prospect. And I like that. And I like his 3-level game. I like his activity after the catch and his physicality in all phases. And he's just a ball winner when the ball's in the air. But also, the really interesting thing about him was his limb dexterity. I talk about that in a clip of his. But really just how he can orient when the ball's in the air and kind of slow things down for himself from I have to get in bounds. I have to also control the ball, but also I have to survive the ground. That's a really important one because you're really trying to survive two things. You're trying to survive the ground, survive the defender. And that's the biggest thing when you're, playing, if you're a ball winning outside receiver, right? Who's in the air a lot. So he does that really well. And that's unique to see at his age for someone who hasn't played a ton of football. I think that's really unique. I just kind of liked learning more about him because he wasn't a prospect that I knew very much about coming into the scouting process other than he transferred from Bama to UCF. And the other one was Marshawn Lloyd because he was someone who, 5'8", 220, prototypical size, right, and stature for a lead back, but has so much to learn but to offer you in terms of upside, right? Like the ball security stuff. The process coupling was really odd. I found at times it was kind of like watching DeAndre Swift at Georgia or Miles Sanders at Penn State, where you're like, that looked funky. Let me rewatch that. You watch it 5 times and you can't understand the decision-making process behind it other than there probably was no process. Yeah. Like instinctually, there's a gap between that and the internal clock in which they need to be operating between.
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting part is he going to correct that? Or is it going to be a long-standing issue like it has been for Miles Sanders and a little bit DeAndre Swift, a lot of it sometimes when you saw him in Detroit, which is actually why he's not there. And now that's a really interesting part to kind of see. But is it going to be, is he going to be like a guy like David Montgomery who figures that out as his career goes on? Or is he going to end up being a former Trojan Ronald Jones?
Yeah.
Where they just never figure that out. all the physical talent that you need to be a lead back in the NFL and be a Pro Bowl caliber player, but they didn't figure out how to actually play the game, how to play the game within the game. That's what playing running back is, down to down. So that's the interesting part, I think, for me with Lloyd, because I like his skill set. I think he has he has 3-down makeup, but it's the little things from a process coupling and marrying that with his physical abilities that you just don't see consistently. Yeah. And it's the consistency that bugs me with prospects, is if you don't see it consistently at a lower level, what's the expectation when the competition gets higher?
Yeah, no, I think that's so well put. And, you know, for me, oftentimes the guys who don't get it, when you mentioned the 3 players that you did, 2 of them, Sanders and Swift, they're kind of, I would, maybe I'd rephrase it as they're one at a time problem solvers. Like they see, they're like, okay, here's the problem. All right, let me solve it. And then they're like, oh, I just ran into another problem. And they usually don't solve it because the solution that they made didn't really take into account the play, the defense, the blocking scheme, their movement, what kind of movement they did. They're like that. They're like the person who's always solving the symptom but not getting to the root issue of the problem. And so like for me, I think one of my answers, and it's an easy answer, and I'll try not to go too far into it. I mean, too easy of answers, but it's just hard not to watch Jonathan Brooks and go, I love how this guy processes the game.
100%.
It's just like that's a guy that's just, I like, not only is it just the processing and I see multiple things and I understand how to balance what's the best decision, but I love running backs who attack first. I love guys who, because that's a process coupling thing. That's a thing where you say, I'm going to dictate the movement chain. And the best way to dictate the movement chain is to be the aggressor and force the opponent to react. And if you the best players either do that consistently, and so when you hit as opposed to getting hit, my theory has always been, and at least from very limited experience hitting people on a football field without pads, but did it enough to kind of have that theory and being effective on that level and playing like my high school football team. You at least have a lot better experiences than I had, so you can tell me. And also from watching it and talking with guys was the idea of like, if you strike first, you're not taking punishment, you're dishing out punishment. It feels different. And it felt different to me to an extent, unless you don't know how you're hitting, and but like if you're leading with your pads and you're striking, not only are you dishing out the punishment, but now you have the next first step.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, for me, my experience is basically, being a dropout football player into being a good enough track athlete, right? So, but really from like looking at the game, like Jonathan Brooks is great at what we call processing and understanding sequential information.
Yeah.
He understands information really well in sequence, and in sequence that he is the creator of.
Yes.
And that's the important part. Some backs cannot do that. DeAndre Swift, nope. Miles Sanders, nope. Marshawn Lloyd, nope. And so that's the big thing, is sequential information is super important, because that's what you get as a running back.
Yeah.
You don't get easy answers.
No.
Especially at the NFL level. You have to figure out information in sequence, and it's sequence that you create.
Yes.
So that's the big thing.
And that's a great way of putting it. And the other thing is that the best players not only dictate that so that they can figure things out in sequence, they can take sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes a defender who's good can say, no, I'm taking the sequence back, and I'm going to do something to completely change the sequence. And the best players can say, nope, I'm countering your counter. And can figure out a way to do that, and it within the same play. So Brooks strikes me as a player, from what I've seen, who has the potential to do that even more often than he does. So I'm in love with Jonathan Brooks as a player.
I think he's awesome.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to win the Y Series vote for this week. So I've already started doing like just getting more and more clips on him. But really, the biggest thing that stands out is he is so calm when things get muddy and thrown in his face in the backfield.
Yeah.
That's my huge takeaway. Is that is a rare trait for a young back. You don't see that until 3-4 years down the line.
Yeah.
And that's a super important thing. Is he's always in control.
Yeah.
And that's what you really like, because running backs, down-to-down control is one of the more important traits you can have as a back in the NFL.
Yeah.
If you want to stay in the field all 3 downs, you need to have down-to-down control. Christian McCaffrey, exceptional down-to-down control. And that's really what makes him, in my opinion, the best running back in the league.
Yeah.
Nick Chubb, fascinatingly good down-to-down control. And that's the stuff that makes those guys elite. Is they have that and they have good physical ability. Now with Brooks, the question is he going to be able to decelerate, reaccelerate, and react the same to contact post ACL?
Yeah.
And how long is that going to take? Usually you see year 2 post everything starts to get back to normal a little bit. But even some guys it doesn't, like Saquon Barkley. Athletically, Saquon Barkley has never been the same since rookie year Saquon.
Yeah.
But his game has changed and evolved to make him still a good player, still a top 10 back in the NFL, right? But that's the interesting part of Brooks is, and the rest of this running back class is like, if everything were, across the board normal, Brooks is the absolutely number 1 back in this class. Hands down, 100%.
Yeah.
But from the standpoint of, is he going to be the same decelerator? Is his contact integrity going to be the same? Those are questions that we don't have the answer for. But I think in time he will be. And I think he's going to be an early 2nd-round pick. Jerry's going to love this kid, so I think he's going to go to Dallas. But I think he's going to be afforded time to do so and get back to normal. If he does, he's a Pro Bowl caliber guy for sure, 100%.
Yeah. So I've got 2 more that are fun that I think are.
I love it.
I'll put us up. So
cool.
Keon Coleman.
Oh yeah,
I am a Keon Coleman.
You love
fan.
Keon Coleman.
I am a fan, and it's just. I think he's a smart mover. I think he's an efficient mover. And we may not agree on that end of the spectrum. I can kind of tell, but like he's a smart move to me. Like I watch him as a route runner, and I repeatedly saw him get early separation,
Sure.
on a variety of intermediate routes and get early separation out of breaks. He was someone that I looked at and go, okay, the speed may not be time speed may not be there right, and from what we've seen of that time speed.
Mm-hmm.
But he was always a step or two on someone. And I know that when you project players, we'd like to see in the college game 3 or 4 steps or 4 or 5 steps or something of that nature. But I felt like the situations where I saw him get the necessary separation were projectable NFL plays. And then when I looked at him as a runner after the catch, especially returning punts, and saw the control to open your hips and make those elegant solutions. And I know that, like, I said this on another podcast earlier this week. I'm like, if we're going to take the impossible situation and say, all right, who are you going to bet on to make the impossible catch in out of this class? A lot of people would say Marvin Harrison Jr., and I get it, But, like, if I was going to say there's a brick wall standing in here and you need to throw the ball through a brick wall and the receiver's got to come down with it, I'm picking Keon Coleman. Like, just from body adjustment, confidence, hand usage, control, all of that. And so, it's not just that I liked him so much. It's also what I liked about the evaluation is to be able to look at it and provide the nuance and say, I think that here's where I see the failure. The potential failure is gets a poor processing QB. He's the second option, and he gets open right away. But now, as the quarterback slowly turns back his way, you can't find him. And now he's getting labeled a boundary winner, contested catch guy without any nuance, even though he does have the nuance, and he's slotted in a role where he just does not succeed. And I think that for me, the ability to say, look, I know what this guy's ceiling can be, and I'm putting that ceiling out there, but I
Yeah.
also know that there's a real trap door, and it's not necessarily all the fault of his own. It's
Right.
just the who he could land with. He gets Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. They say see it at T. Higgins.
Right.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
If he gets, as Paul Perticchese suggested earlier today, at Saturday to Sunday, he gets paired with Josh Allen, and Josh Allen's going to go, screw it, I'm going to fit it into him no matter what. I'm okay with that too, even though that may not maximize who he is
Right.
as a technician, but it maximizes his production potential because of the volume he'll get.
100%. And I was just when you were saying that, I was thinking Joe Burrow because T. Higgins, similar archetype of receiver, actually, right?
Yeah.
Not a very abrupt accelerator, wins with nuance and early route technique and tactic,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have the vertical speed to really separate from some number one corners. So he's a great number two on an offense, but as a timing-based quarterback, that's the hard thing. When projecting a guy like Keon Coleman, it's if he gets a timing-based quarterback, Joe Burrow, for example, right? You could very well see a T. Higgins type career,
Yes.
right? And that is absolutely in the cards for a guy like Keon Coleman. But the issue becomes if he gets a Daniel Jones,
Yep.
he becomes Devontae
Yeah.
Parker,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
that's the really tough thing is he's pigeonholed into this role where he can never succeed in because the quarterback's not good enough for him to have success.
Yeah.
And that's the tough thing is he's pigeonholed into an X role, but he's not just an X receiver, right? He's just not a boundary guy. He can be someone who wins with you in the screen game. He can be someone you rotate in the slot and he causes problems because of his size and length and athletic ability. So that's the thing is you need a creative offensive coordinator and or a quarterback that's very timing based in terms of approach, right? Like imagine Drake London on the Giants wouldn't work very well.
Imagine Drake
Right?
London on the Falcons last year.
Yeah, it was bad
I
too.
mean, yeah. I
Hey,
mean,
he made it work, but
yeah.
I mean that's kind of what you're looking at is those type of receivers,
Yeah.
the bigger body tacticians need a timing based quarterback. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And you need precision, and
And how many
if you
Drew
don't,
Brees, Joe Burrows are out there? Yeah.
not many.
Yeah.
Imagine Michael Thomas without Drew Brees.
Yeah.
Michael Thomas hasn't looked very good when he's been healthy with non-Drew Brees,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's the tough thing is that those guys need a certain type of quarterback. But I think Coleman will be probably early second rounder. That's my estimation. My hope is it's Cincinnati, and
It
they
is
get rid of
me
T.
too.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah. Let T walk. If he doesn't want to be on a championship caliber contender for the money, I understand.
Right.
You want the money, but
For
You
sure.
know.
But what's gonna be better than the thing is like what's gonna be better than Joe Burrow? And the thing is,
yes.
guys like, in my opinion, players like T don't understand. They are a better Robin than a
Yep.
Batman,
Yes.
and that's totally okay.
They
It is totally fine.
Stop listening to the fantasy analysts telling you you're a wide receiver one.
And that's the thing is like there's very few wide receiver twos that I think can just be a wide receiver one, like Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
Like great that he can be awesome anywhere in the league. It's fine. Jalen Waddle, you can say that too. But
I
even him to
definitely-
an extent,
yeah.
it's like is he a good enough 3-level winner, can stay healthy, stay durable? T. Higgins can't do that.
Yeah.
Like that's the issue. So
And-
it's like he can't stay healthy in terms of being durable for a 17 game season plus playoffs.
Yeah.
And he's not a true 3-level guy that Jamar Chase is on the other side of the field.
Yeah, and I'm
So,
like, and for
tough.
me, Devonta's tough for me because I look at him and I go, I don't think he's physical enough to withstand tight coverage at the boundary. Like that's where I have issues with him.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's
can he separate? Can he
it's
like? Can he earn position on those? Because that's where he gets bullied. But again, it's close. It's close.
right, but there's very few of those guys. Like
Yes.
those guys are very few, and even the higher end ones, like Devontae Smith, in my opinion, is the best two in the league.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you still have questions about it. I mean,
Yeah.
he had 900 plus, I think, with Jalen Hurts and the hodgepodge of
Yeah.
crap they had in the
Sure.
first rookie year.
Sure.
But
Sure.
still, like
Yeah.
you don't know if that's like if he can be a wide receiver. You might not ever know because he might be
Yeah.
in Philly forever. But a guy like T. Higgins needs the
Yeah.
he's a Robin. That's fine. He's a
Yeah.
good Robin.
He's a very
real good
one.
Robin.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand there's a lot of Robins in this class.
Yes.
And that is an okay thing. The
Yeah.
NFL is moving towards a, two alpha system at receiver where you have two guys that can win down to down. And Callahan was talking today about the Titans, Titans core of guys. And he mentioned Hopkins and Ridley. And he's like, well, it's important to have two guys that can win any down. He's absolutely right. Like that's what the NFL is moving towards. It's not your boundary X is going to be your target funnel most of the game. It's you move these guys around and you get mismatches and you get schematic advantages and you let those guys play.
Yeah. There's too many, to be honest with you, that I really enjoyed watching. Like too many to mention.
100%.
So it's hard because Anaya Smith is obviously another one. But we talked about him before, so I don't really want to go into that. Blake Watson,
yes, yeah.
Blake Watson is a fun one, for sure. But then I laugh because we've talked Dylan Johnson, we've talked Kamani Vidal, Blake Watson. I may not think his pass pro's ready for prime time, but Ray Davis is a good back. It feels weird to put him number 10 on my board.
It's just wild because they're all right there.
Yeah.
Like the difference between Blake Watson, Marshawn Lloyd, and Kamani Vidal in terms of talent is not very wide.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty marginal. And I think the NFL always errs towards the big school. They always have. They always will. But that's the tougher thing. So
who's one that who's one that we could talk about before we move on to our third topic, where it's like pick one and I'll pick one that's like a guy that's totally off fantasy radars or major draft radar that you're just like, I enjoyed watching this kid. We'll see what happens, but I was captivated by what I saw.
Oh man, I'd say two, and one of them is I don't think he's super off radar, but I think he kind of is, and we talked about him a little bit. Rasheen Ali.
Yes,
I think that's one of them because you watch especially his early career tape. Like his freshman tape is ridiculous. Like it's some of the best in this class tape. He's very much a Ajay Spears, right? Like in that vein of mover. Obviously same school, but that was one. I think Jamari Thrash. I think I just loved his tape.
Yeah, I get it.
Because I'm like, he plays so much bigger than he is, and he was so good at getting hidden yards after the catch. I chuckled sometimes because I'm like, he turned a 5-yard gain into an 8.5-yard gain.
Yeah,
and I'm like, the defender is definitely pissed it wasn't just a 5-yard gain. And it happened over and over and over again. I'd say he was one for me that just watching his tape, I just enjoyed. Do I think a guy like that's going to stick in the league? Hard to say because it's such a deep class, but I just liked watching him. So I thought he was just unique in the facet that there's not many guys I label as like hidden yardage receivers, and he kind of has that label.
Look, I have him as my 26 wide receiver, and he's not far away from Roman Wilson or Devontae Walker in my book. I would be rooting for him.
Yeah,
on the level of like those guys have much higher profiles.
Sure,
but Thrash wasn't that far away, so I get it. For me, who was your other guy? You mentioned Ali and Thrash.
Ali and
Thrash.
Thrash are
You
my
had
two.
Ali and Thrash. If I had to, George Halani out of Boise State.
Yeah,
I think this
yeah,
he's got better contact balance than I think maybe he's credit for. He's a better mover than I thought he was. And I thought he just got better every year because the joke is for me, it's not anybody
right.
else has joked with me about it, but I'm going to make fun of myself. Sometimes I have the damnedest time figuring out who the hell's coming out in this draft class. I mean, I look at multiple sources, but these past few years have been kind of tough with the COVID year
No,
and
for
everything
sure.
going on. So the funny thing is, George Halani's been in my RSP for the third year straight because I
Hey, he's
miscalculated
a lifer,
twice.
man.
He's a lifer. He's gonna be in it next. Yeah.
Copy paste. Move him
I'm like,
over.
but I like
That's
literally,
funny.
I literally guessed wrong twice. Like I looked
That's
everywhere and
funny.
I thought, and there were places that had. I'm not going to give away who said what, but like there were some places
Sure, 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 sure,
at the
sure.
time I put him in. So this year, but he kept moving up he kept getting a better score each year. So he was like, and I'm
That's
looking back at my
hilarious.
stuff and I'm like, yeah, he's gotten better. And so I watched him against you. One of the games I remember vividly was the UCLA game, and he just makes people miss and breaks tackles and goes through contact and catches well and is quicker than I thought. And like, I saw enough from that, and I was like, this guy actually has a legit shot of making a roster. Before I
Yeah.
kind of saw him as a, um, oh, I'm trying to remember the kid's name. He was also at Boise State. That a lot of people liked him, and he played a little bit with the Titans and played a little bit with the Buccaneers.
Oh
And you
man.
know who I'm talking about. And he got a little bit of love from the fantasy community, but I was
How
never
long ago was this?
about 5 years ago, maybe 7 if I'm really like
Oh, is it Ian Johnson? Am I
not
just dumb?
no, not Ian.
Okay, okay.
That he was more of a scat back than I don't know if Ian was, but I don't remember his name. But somebody's going to listen here and know, and they're screaming the name right now as they're doing the podcast. And I'm sorry that I do this all the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
but he I thought he was that kind of back, and now the more I watch him, I'm like, he's more of a Jeff Wilson with a little bit more pop to
Oh
his game.
yeah.
Like I don't know if, again, in a class that is everyone's gonna fall down because of the value of the player and the depth of the other classes,
Right,
whatever, may not be there on that level. So there's that, and then
right.
I. He ran a 4.7 140, this guy, 7.2 3-cone drill, 30-inch vertical leap. That does not sound good for a running back at 5'9", 207. But Dejon Edwards,
Yeah,
watching
Georgia.
Dejon
Yeah.
play, I was just like, this kid processes much faster than his timed movements. And he's
Right.
got really strong vision. His footwork was good. He just looks faster, and he just reminds me of Jalen Richard. Like another
Mm.
back I really liked, who I had him
Mm-hmm.
rated ninth in that class, and I just was really a fan. And I could see Edwards having having like a Jalen Richard type of um, opportunity or like career. Maybe even if he shows that he's faster than what he was timed
Right.
and shows consistency and right fit, maybe a James White type of scenario for him.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
I like that. I like Dejon Edwards is interesting because he was the best back in a good room.
Yes.
I thought I think I wouldn't say best in terms of
Talent.
talent, but I would say he was if I was an offensive coordinator, I would trust him the most out of any of the guys in that.
Yeah. Yeah. If Kendall Milton had started his career and continued his career, and at the very end, I feel like the light came on for Kendall Milton towards the end.
I agree with
And
you.
like, he
Look
was
too
like,
late, but yes,
yeah,
I agree.
like he looked and goes, "Oh yeah, I was a 5-star prospect, and I should be drafted like one." And
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance to be like like a slower Eddie George. Like I had a
Oh
chance to
yeah,
be
sure.
that, and I didn't do it. And I gotta show that I can. And I think
Right.
he showed glimpses of that. Like the light came on, and somebody's got to get the duct tape and like literally duct tape
Sure,
that
sure, sure.
switch to the wall. But Edward, if he had Edwards like problem solving and approach to the game,
Hmm.
he'd be a top 5 prospect in this
Yeah, for sure.
class. Yeah.
100%.
So yeah, those were my two.
I
So
love it.
yeah. So all right. So moving on. Our next concept, coach killer. I heard. Um, I think it was. I don't remember who said it, but it may have been either Kurt Bankert or somebody called Drake May a coach killer. And
Yeah, no, I saw that. Yeah.
yeah. And so, somebody asked me about that earlier this week on a Giants pod. Like, is Drake May a coach killer? And, I'm interested in what you think about it. Because for me, like, coach killer is not so much that the kid is a bad kid who's going to triangulate in their communication and make other people look bad and do things that are going to undermine the coach in that way. I think it's more the kid is not what necessarily the coach really wanted or the team really wanted, but the players on the team really would have wanted or picked, but the executive in charge of making that decision and driving that decision basically shoved this kid into this situation. And now the problem is now it's coach against exec or coach against player by and exec by proxy by saying, look, I didn't want a rookie quarterback if it's Drake May in this situation as the example. I didn't want this rookie quarterback.
Hmm.
They're going to make me start him. I if I don't roll with him and if I don't roll with him, then I'm going to get fired. If I do roll
Yeah.
with him, I'm going to get fired unless I prove without a
Either way.
shadow of a doubt early, that this is well beyond my fault. This is
Yep.
so well beyond my fault that you could have put Bill Walsh in here and this wasn't going to work.
100%.
And that rarely happens. And I think that that's what a coach killer is, because it's only used for quarterback most of the time.
It really, yeah, it really is. It's kind of Josh Rosen, first one that comes to mind, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one that, we look at, I'm a Chicago person, so like Justin Fields with Matt Nagy made
Yeah.
no sense
No.
with what, Matt Nagy wants to play the Andy Reid brand of football, right?
Yeah.
Made no sense to have, Justin Fields with Matt Nagy, right? To develop a quarterback like that who needs a more intricate run-driven approach, right? That's what we saw like when Mitch Trubisky started for the Bears. When Matt Nagy was calling plays, Mitch Trubisky was not, and that offense was not very successful. But when they went on that winning streak and they lost to the Saints that year in the playoffs, that was that Wims catch and he dropped it in the end zone. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Bill Lazor got that offense on track because they just called 12 personnel, gave Dave Montgomery the ball 25 times a game, kept him on schedule, defense off the field, played ball control football, and won a lot of games. That's an example. I think in this class, Drake May's a good one. I think he's one that can definitely bite you because I think and you and I have talked about this before. I think Drake May needs a year or two of seasoning. I wouldn't call it developing. I'd call it seasoning because he just needs a little bit more than what he currently has. And then what he was currently given at UNC, which if you look at the past history of quarterbacks coming out of there, like Mitchell Trubisky, like Sam Howell, they lack the cognitive part of the game. I don't think that's a coincidence either. The timing element of playing quarterback isn't there with them or wasn't there at UNC. It wasn't asked of them as much as it is for other guys. That's important. So I think he's a big one. I think J.J. McCarthy is someone that gets you fired too. I like JJ McCarthy,
Yeah.
and I think he can be a Brock Purdy type quarterback in the NFL with maybe a little bit more in terms of pure physical ability. But I think he's another one because you see, it was like the Mitch Trubisky syndrome when the Bears drafted him. You see the white knight, you see the nice kid with a nice smile,
Yeah.
and he's going to get it done,
Yeah.
but then he doesn't.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah.
I think JJ McCarthy is better than Mitch Trubisky. I think he's a Brock Purdy type player that can be successful, but I don't think he's a quarterback you trade up for.
Yeah. And I
Right.
totally get that. I'm gonna add another one that comes to mind because Drake May we've beaten to death. I feel bad
For
for
sure.
him and left him on the side of the road.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah, for
wish him the
sure.
best for him. And McCarthy certainly makes perfect sense. I'm gonna go Jaden Daniels because
Yeah.
here's the deal. Like I thought Lamar Jackson got such a raw deal. We all know that Lamar Jackson got a raw deal by the NFL early on in terms of the way he was treated draft capital wise. And the Ravens the Ravens did the smart thing to get him, you know. But I would also argue based on both this is both a foresight validated by hindsight from last year argument that when scouting him, I was like, this he's the best pocket quarterback in this class, and he played in. We all know he played in a good NFL style of
Right.
offense. This kid's a quarterback. I don't know what all this stuff is. Well, we
Right.
do, but so it was what it was. But I kind of felt like getting Greg Roman in that offense was kind of like a savior mentality of like saying, you know what, Lamar, we're gonna get you because our scouts like you, Ozzy really liked you, it's on the way out, this kind of thing. But somebody in that organization had doubts, and it was
For
somebody
sure.
over Ozzie Newsome, and they probably were like, well, we need to get somebody proven who's worked with Michael Vick or who's worked in a way of like doing this kind of thing where we need to baby step them into being an
Right.
NFL quarterback. And he did not need that much baby stepping. Like he needed the normal baby stepping we beg quarterbacks to
Right.
have, but it felt like it went on for 2 years too long, maybe
For
3 years
sure.
too long. And finally, when I think this guy, what else did he have to do? Negotiate his own contract and get good terms out of it to prove to them that he was
Right.
smart enough to to handle all this? I think so. So, but I look at Jaden Daniels and I see his game and I go, you know what? I hear he's a processor from others that now I'm following, and that they say he processes as well. But from what I saw, I thought he was always a half beat too late. Like I always thought that just he didn't understand. Like he would, you'd see him make three receiver reads occasionally. You'd see one at least two reads,
Sure.
but you also saw where maybe he was told two and run or one and run.
Sure.
And then you also saw some where he wasn't told that. He had lots of room. And you see that over route working across a zone where you go, you should put two and two together and know if you just take one more hitch and you've cleared, you've got no one around you. Take one more hitch and this is going to break open. And instead, it was like multiple games. No hitch, just turn away. And just as he's turning this way, the receiver's breaking across open.
Right.
And I'm like, Dak had that issue. And sometimes, a little bit at Mississippi State. So, it didn't kill his career. But I do wonder if teams are going to approach him and either they're going to throw him into the fire too quick, expecting him to be like a fast processor, and he's not, and that gets them hurt, or they go to extremes with how they're going to stair step him into the league to the point that they've already labeled him and now he's got to fight through some of that, and he's a more limited quarterback than Lamar was in terms
Right.
of like running. He's more of a Marcus Mariota, and does he wind up
100%.
a Marcus Mariota? And then that's a coach killer scenario.
Well, 100%. Yeah, I 100% agree with it. And two, it's he had a really good, especially this past year. You had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, Brian Thomas Jr., like two good receivers, two first round receivers. So that's the thing too, is a good enough offensive line, right? But the timing part of it's interesting because he didn't have to be perfect timing wise for either of those guys for different reasons because of how good Neighbors was after the catch, and because of how much separation Brian Thomas created, because of how much attention Malik Neighbors created. So it was kind of a perfect storm of elements that can help Daniel's success. And that's going to be interesting to see if he goes 2 to Washington. It's a better spot than he goes 3 to New England.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, you go to Washington, you have good receivers. You have, a good nucleus around you. You potentially are going to sit a year. Great. New England's starved for a quarterback. They want you out there. And they don't have any playmakers really on offense, right? So it's like, that's a tough thing. And if you just look developmentally, like, it's very situation dependent at quarterback. Like Caleb Williams walking into an unbelievable situation, number 1 overall. You don't see that ever, right? With 2 good receivers, potentially adding a third, a new offensive line, new coordinator, a good run game. Like, you don't see that, right?
No.
But Washington and New England, it's kind of contrast. You have a team that's got good receivers, a good running back. They want to win, but they are okay with letting you develop. And a New England who's starved for a quarterback since Tom Brady.
Yeah, New England's like Big Lots, but somebody robbed the store of anything that was left. Even if from that point, like, it's just
sure.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a rough one, but it makes total sense to me.
Right.
So
100%.
All right, so let's talk about these high-end career outcomes for 3 prospects.
Sure.
Troy Franklin. All right. Obviously kind of polarizing to some extent for people. What do you think a high-end career outcome is for him?
I think DJ Chark.
Okay.
I think DJ Chark was a good receiver, 1,000-yard receiver, right, with Jacksonville. I think if he would have stayed healthy, he would be potentially a perennial 1,000-yard guy in the right system. I think that's what we're going to look at from Troy Franklin's perspective, because he operates primarily on level 3. And he's very good at that because of how good he is at the line of scrimmage, I think, too. And you kind of marry that with his long speed and his ability to accelerate, and you get a good level 3 receiver. And I think DJ Chark, at kind of his apex, that's what he kind of was.
Yeah.
Do I think Troy Franklin's going to be this megastar, multi-time Pro Bowler? I don't, but I see the avenue where he can be in the right system. Because I think he needs to be a second receiver. I don't think he's going to be. There's only a few guys in this class that I think are going to be, the key cogs in an offense, the number ones. But I think from Franklin's perspective, you need a vertical offense, a vertical-oriented passing offense. I think the Buffalo Bills is probably the best fit for a guy like that. You can say it for a lot of receivers in this class, probably, right, because of Stephon Diggs' departure. But realistically, you want a situation where you want a bigger arm quarterback, one that's not afraid to let it rip down the field, because he's a much, much better version of a Marquez Valdez-Scantling type player. But yeah, I think a DJ Chark for me is kind of the higher end of outcomes. And I think also a realistic one for Troy Franklin. Obviously, like a Will Fuller is a consistent Will Fuller is probably the highest of end of outcomes, right? The upteenth. But I think more so of a DJ Chark would be kind of what we see from his career, which is not a bad thing whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most current and best comparison probably, because I think of Jameson Williams in terms of what he is right now,
sure,
and what we hope he could become a little bit, but to me the players that came to mind all the time were Chris Chambers and Lee Evans, and
sure.
to me that's in a sense, but they're more physical than what Troy Franklin was. So that's the tough part, is that those guys were more physical. They were bigger players, but what they did in function was similar to Chark as well. And Chark's bigger,
sure,
more physical. So, And then when I think of the guy that fits him physically, I think of Paul Richardson, but I don't think,
Yeah, for sure.
but I don't, I think Paul Richardson was a more complete player who couldn't stay healthy,
Right,
long enough
right,
to really,
for
really
sure.
earn that. Okay. So next on our list, we have our man Xavier Worthy. What's your high end comp for that one?
Deshaun Jackson.
See, I'm the same way.
I
I'm right
think,
there with you.
yeah, I think he can be a game wrecking. I think he can be a number one in offense.
Yeah,
I'm pretty high on Worthy in terms of grade. I just like how he operates on all three levels,
yeah,
and he was an incredible freshman.
yeah,
Um, but when you watch the Texas offense, there's so much dysfunction, and it starts with Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers just, he's hard to watch at times. I'll be
yeah,
very honest,
yeah,
just because of the multi quadrant reads aren't there. He doesn't process information quickly enough, and he misses Worthy deep a lot in
yeah,
terms of just missing him coming open. Um, but I think too, Worthy can offer you more after the catch. Um, I think he can offer you as a middle of the field target too, especially on crossers,
he's
right?
tough.
Yeah, tough kid, um, physical,
Yep.
for his size, and I think he offers kind of that new era of receiver where you look more like Devontae Smith than you do Julio Jones.
Yeah.
And I think he's a perfect fit in the modern NFL in that regard if he goes to a vertical passing offense. We say it a lot for these receivers in this class. But I think with Worthy, he can operate on all three levels and also give you a really good punt returner. That's another area where he can excel in, like Deshaun Jackson.
Yep.
And guys like that who have that high end of combined, accelerative capabilities and top end speed have very long careers.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's what the Deshaun Jackson comparison. Dude, I saw Deshaun Jackson 2 years ago catching bombs from Jalen Hurts,
Yep.
right? Like I think that could be the high end outcome for a kid like Xavier Worthy.
He's my. I have two players on that high end outcome that they're slashed, as you know, and it's Jackson and Isaac Bruce, and and
Okay, yeah,
and
as a
so
Bruce, interesting.
because Bruce also was like 168 and still he was a contested ball catcher. He worked over the middle, had great after the catch skill, very fluid, very quick, a burner. We always think of the Rams like basically going to the ground after they catch the ball. But Bruce played a good bit of time in the NFL. You're going to take your shots. And so those two guys. Now, if I was going to go really old school, like my youth, I think about this player a lot because, when people talk about size in this game and how, especially with quarterback, but also with wide receiver, all I can think about is this year I saw a play where Mel Blount, who is probably
Oh my
the
goodness,
the
yeah,
who is if you've ever seen Mel Blount play, you would know that he should strike fear in your heart as a cornerback. Just think of like the mean ass cornerback snarling on the opposite side of you, who probably hits more like a strong side linebacker. Okay, but is as fat but fast and like just a freakish athlete. I saw a play back in the mid 70s that they showed on X that was a clip of Mel Blount literally performing a wrestling finishing move on Cliff Branch. Okay, wasn't even like penalized. It was like basically a suplex on top of
sure.
his head. I think we called it when I was a kid. They called it a brain buster. I mean, like literally dropped him on his head, and he got up and like kept playing. He played like another like 7 years after that and had like a couple of Pro Bowl. Cliff Branch, and he was that size. He was that small, and I just think we overemphasize size to an extent. And with reach, I get it. With working between the tackles, I get it. But if you're an outside speed receiver, um,
Yeah,
whether you're 230 and taking that hit or you're
yeah,
165 and taking that hit, it doesn't make as much of a difference.
for
So
sure.
I'm totally in on that comp, and I'll add Cliff Branch for the grandpas in this in
Sure,
the listening
sure,
area
sure.
here. So our final one, Keon Coleman. I think
Yeah,
we kind of mentioned him, but I'm
we
curious where you're. Do you have a higher end outcome than T Higgins, Mike Williams?
I mean, I think your highest. I mean, T Higgins is, I think, the one highest end. I think maybe
Okay.
Michael Thomas. I think that could be the highest end of outcomes. But you need a very specific passer for that, right? And
Yeah.
and that's a lot of trust from a quarterback. But it's also too schematically, like that offense operated through, Mike Thomas and then,
Yeah.
Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, right? But really, like, it's just the Drew Brees timing stuff. Even you look at Kamara, it was just angle and option routes, right? And he just
Yeah.
destroyed people on those, right? Because the mismatch with the backer. But with Drew Brees, it's the timing of the slant, the different types of slants they would run too, which is really interesting, right? The timing of those is just a very like savvy thing that you
Yeah.
don't, in this era of quarterbacking is not as you're not going to see it as much. But like you need a specific passer for that, right? But also you need a volume based offense that's going to revolve around that player. But I think Mike Thomas is the highest end. I think he ends up between T. Higgins and Devontae Parker. I think that's where he likely like median outcome ends up between there. Um, but I think it's just hard to say
Yeah.
because this is such a deep receiver class. Like he could get pigeonholed into a bad spot,
Yeah.
um, and get with the New York Giants. And then what do you do? Like you
Yeah.
wait around for a quarterback to be able to deliver you the ball.
Yeah. Okay, so those I think that was the most logical comp for sure. I'm going to give you a slightly illogical comp
Oh, I
because
like
I'm just
logical.
can't. I'm
You're that guy when it comes to Keon Coleman, so we got to hear
I'm
it.
going to give you slightly logical. I think T Higgins is kind of where if things work out, hope as we hope, I think T Higgins makes sense. But I also think just from watching him as a mover, I think there's more to his game as a mover and as a runner. And I think we've gotten too hung up on like how fast he is and all
Mm-hmm.
that. I think we might look at him and go, for year one or year two that someone starts making this comp I'm about to make, people will go, nah. And then somebody with a bigger profile is going to say it and they're gonna go, yeah, I can kind of see that. It's like your older brother. It's like the little brother who says something smart or astute, and then the
Sure.
older and everybody's like, no, and then the older brother 5 minutes later comes in and says, I think this. Everybody's like, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
That player's Anquan Bolden.
Okay,
You
yeah. I mean,
like,
I
you
don't think it's
know,
I don't think it's that I don't think it's that like
yeah, but
crazy.
I think of early career Anquan
It
Bolden.
was a stud,
Yeah, yeah.
stud.
And I just see how Coleman moves and how physical he is, and I think, yeah, that I there's something about that Anquan Bolden thing that just it keeps itching me, and I look at it and go, "This is dumb," but
I
I
love it.
put it down
You
anyway
got to put it
because
out
I
there.
couldn't shake it. I couldn't shake
That's
it, and
funny.
I'm just like, fine, I'm putting it out there because
I love it.
there's times that I haven't put things out there or I have, and I go, "This is stupid," and it ends up working out. So
Right.
I just stick with
I
it
love it.
now. Yeah. So
I
there we
love
go.
it.
Well, I'll tell you what I love doing the show with you. It's so much
Absolutely.
fun. We have a good time. Go check out Angelo Analysis, and check out the subscription that he offers. I'm subscribed. I'm really enjoying it thus far. Check out the rookie scouting portfolio,
Absolutely.
mattwaldman.com, and you can download it from there. And you know, and check out multiple draft guides. That's kind of my suggestion is that like if you enjoy doing what you're doing, if you enjoy this a lot, getting different ideas, of how people look at things, it might help you kind of formulate some ideas about how you like what you like about content, what you're looking
Yeah,
for,
for
and
sure.
and just and just kind of and get a better understanding of the game that's out there because at the end of the day, you're not looking specifically. We're all trying to be right. I think we're all. I think people who are trying to do this the best way, they're trying to be right. Um,
For sure.
now, I, I I appreciate people trying to be entertaining, as long as they're trying to be right in addition to being entertaining. I would almost say try to be right first, and then try to be entertaining in what you're doing. But I think also, with that said, we all have different processes. So it's a fun way to be able to look at this and see what those processes are about a little bit, gain a little bit of insight. And the only way you do that is kind of look around.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I actually had someone shoot me a message and say, yeah, I actually have a spreadsheet with you, Matt Waldman, and somebody else that I follow that I really like. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, that is really, like, forming like your own opinions very important,
Yeah.
but putting together kind of a nucleus of opinions that you really trust. And this person really, like, they ranked it on their spreadsheets of like how, like, you and I've ranked players and then how they would rank them. That stuff's awesome.
Yeah,
like, I think it just makes it, and to, like, don't be afraid to engage with people. Like, I'm just a dude. So, like, people who just jump in my, DMs or message me or shoot me emails, like, I love it. Because really, like, we all play the same game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And
we all play the same game. So it's fun when it's very fun to me when that stuff happens. Like, that's the stuff that makes my day. Absolutely.
yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, somebody might go, well, how am I going to discern the difference between how somebody, like somebody asked me this, like how you, Daniel Jeremiah, and Dane Brugler look at prospects at quarterback. And I'm going to go, I don't know. Because I don't know how they grade accuracy. I don't know how they grade these things. I know what I do. I'll read some of their stuff and I'll go, oh, that's cool. That's interesting that they think that way. But I'm not going to have the time to dig into why unless we somehow wind up on in the same format, like on a panel somewhere, or sit around, I'll joke, me and Daniel Jeremiah having an avocado toast and like sit there and talk about how we grade players, but that's unlikely to happen for any length of time, and really then follow up to really truly do. We might have a 20-minute conversation that's cool, but we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time digging into it. So you looking at the three of us, or like the two of us, for instance, and look at the differences, you might go, okay, well, here's where Matt errs on the side of this. Here's where Brandon errs on the side of that. Here's where Brandon throws caution to the wind. Here's where Matt throws caution to the wind. And you kind of get a vibe for that, because at the end of the day, the rankings part, the projection part's the hard part. But if what you find from us is that what we're describing, you can see when you watch it. You're not looking and going, God, that guy said he couldn't catch. And like, he catches everything.
Right.
All right.
Sure.
Now, if we're saying we don't think he can catch in these situations very well, but that's improvable, or it might be difficult to improve. It depends on where he goes. And then you start seeing that happening. That's good information. You're getting scouting. When you're scouting something, like if you were scouting a battle, you're not going to say, well, this is definitely going to happen. You're going to say, well, the lay of the land looks like this. So if we come down here doing this, it's going to be disadvantageous for us, and we could all get killed.
Right.
So instead, you might want to do this. We all might still get killed, but but we might prolong things enough that what we try to do strategically might actually work out. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with scouting, is to accurately describe the land enough to give you all the variables that we can.
Yeah, no, it's all probability. Just figuring it. It's all just two infinite variables in a sense too. There's so many things that go on that we do not know.
Right. Yeah.
Behind the scenes stuff that we may never know.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's just, it's fun. That's what makes it fun too. But yeah, no, that's always a really cool part of it, is when people come with opinions like that. I think it's awesome.
For sure. So thank you again. You can subscribe to this podcast if it's the first time you've done it, at Matt Waldman's RSP cast, Matt Waldman's RSP cast, and you can find Going Deep there. I'll also put it up on YouTube. I've separated out channels, so I have a I have RSP podcasts now. You can find it Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room on YouTube, and you'll find there's a dedicated channel for that. And for those of you who've had trouble downloading, or not trouble downloading, just double listening to the podcast occasionally, I am shopping around for a different platform so that you don't have to download it. And that'll probably start happening this summer. That we'll put that out. But if you download it, nobody's had a problem being able to play it. From what I've heard, is just for those of you on your phone. Sometimes that happens, So, and that it is what it is. But we'll go from there. And thanks again for listening, and good night.